We are now up to Omar Rava on the bottom of Ayin Aleph Amid Aleph. And let's see if we can find the place here. It's 3 lines up before the end of Ayin Aleph Amid Aleph. Rava now, having accepted the objection of Abaye to the Kasha of Rav Yosef, is going to reinterpret the Kasha of Rav Yosef, so that we will understand and appreciate why Rav Yosef opposed Rav Kahana. And he thought that there's no need for the word rachis to prove that boker refers to boker rishon. And Rav Yosef hachiku kasha. It's not the way we understood it until now, and the way Abaye understood the kasha of Rav Yosef, but here's the kasha of Rav Yosef. How is it possible to say that boker means boker sheni, such I need rachis to prove that boker is boker rishon? Mika midi de ilu tana. So now he says, I'm going to quote to you a ton of a brisa. We didn't get to that brisa yet. That brisa is going to really occupy our minds. And lebasar, as far as the subject of this brisa is concerned, for the zman, the time of the psul of basar, lo boy rachis. We don't need a smichus of the word rachis to prove that boker refers to boker rishon. For Rav Kahana, boy, for Rav Kahana limurim, which has an even more chumer dika kedusha, he needs boy rachis to prove that rishon, that boker means boker rishon. So again, we're about to prove from the following brisa that we're about to learn that in the case of basar, the zman psul is the first day, meaning that the word boker is referring to boker rishon. How much more so, the word boker with regard to murim, in the case of lo sol and chelev, has to refer to boker rishon, and I don't need the word rashis. Maihi. Let's see that brisa. The Sanya, we learned in the brisa. The brisa is going back to Chagigas Yud Dalet, and it says in Dvarim Tesvav, Tespark Tezayin, with regard to Chagigas Yud Dalet, it says Lo Yolin Min Abasar Asher Tizbach Ba'erev Biyom Harishon LaBoker. Now, how does this brisa know that this pasuk is addressing Chagigas Yud Dalet? But the answer is you have to emphasize the word in this pasuk Ba'erev. You cannot interpret that this pasuk is referring to the Chagig of Tesvav, because the Zman Shchita of Chagigas Tesvav is on Tesvav. It couldn't say Ba'erev. Ba'erev must be referring to Chagigas Yud Dalet, because Chagigas Yud Dalet, as we said over and over again, is shechted together with the Korban Pesach on the 14th of Nisan. So Ba'erev proves that the subject of this pasuk is Chagigas Yud Dalet. And now we turn to Daf Ayin Aleph Amud Beis. Limeid, this pasuk is coming to teach us al Chagigas Arba'asar benecheles l'shnei yomim v'layla echad. What the brisa is coming to do here is meticulously read this pasuk. The pasuk says B'yom Rishon, and then it says Boker. So B'yom Rishon is a reference to Tesvav, and La Boker is a reference to Tes Zayin. So that's going to give me, number one, Yom Yud Dalet, right? It's Chagigas Yud Dalet, so it's eaten during the day. Then we go into the night of the 15th, and then we go into the day of the 15th. So we have now 2 days with a night in between. We've got Yud Dalet, the night following Yud Dalet going into Tesvav, plus the day of Tesvav. And what you see clearly is that the word Boker, it means the Boker of Tezayin. You're not allowed to leave over the Chagiga until the morning of Tezayin. But during the course of Tesvav, you're okay. You can eat the basar of Chagigas Yudalit, because we're going to give you Yudalit plus Tesvav and the night in between, and that's 2 days and 1 night. So again, let's keep in mind, if we had a whiteboard, that Boker here in this pasuk means Tes Zayin. Then the Brisa asks a very strange question on itself. Oh, Eno Elo Liyom V'Laila. Maybe it means just the day of the 14th and the night going into the 15th. And we're not going to wait till Yom Tezayin to make it into a psul. We're going to start the psul on Yom Tesvav in the morning. So that the word Boker means the Boker of Tesvav. That's the earlier Boker, Boker Rishon, in this Havamina. And then with the daybreak of Tesvav, it becomes Posel and Osab Achila. No, that's impossible. Why? Kishu Omer Bayom Harishon. The beginning of the pasuk says Bayom Harishon, which means that we give in the entire Yom Harishon, which is Tesvav. And then it says La Boker. Hare Boker Sheni Amur. We're going to give him another Boker. So it means that Boker must be referring to the Boker of Tezayin. Oh, Eno, or perhaps you'll say Ela Boker Rishon. Now, this line makes no sense. The Bryce has already proven that since it says Yom Rishon and then it says La Boker, Boker has to be Tezayin. And now the Bryce seems to be backtracking, which the Gemara is going to analyze now, and say, no, maybe Boker means Boker Rishon. I mean, we've already proven that Boker can't be Boker Rishon because it says B'yoma Rishon. It says B'yoma Rishon, and then it says La Boker. But we'll see that in the Gemara. Ani Mekayim, but I have a different pasuk, and we're going to derive from a different pasuk that Chagiga Necheles L'Shnei Yomim V'Layla Echad. And I'm going to prove to you that with Mekayim that in Chagiga Cheres Chutz Mizu. Okay, so again, now the Brisa is raising the possibility that Boker might mean Boker Rishon, but is rejecting that possibility based on a different pasuk that proves to me that Chagiga is eaten for Shnei Yom. Oh. So the Brisa says, no. Kshu Omer Bo, now we'll see that extra pasuk that teaches me that Chagiga is eaten for 2 days and 1 night. And it says with regard to the Karban Shlomim in Vayikra Zayin, this is the parsha of what's called Nidava. If a person voluntarily offers to bring a Karban Shlom, it says in Neder o Nidava, I'll read no pasuk, Zevach Karbano, Biyom Hakrivo es Zivcho Ye Ochel, Umi Mochras, Vanosu Menu Ye Ochel. And the opening word in this pasuk is the word im. And the word im is understood as a ribui. And it's coming to teach me, the pasuk itself, without the word im, I mean, that if you have a nidava, shalmi nidava, you can eat it for 2 days and 1 night. Now the Torah adds the word im. And that's coming to be marbe even shalmei chova, limit al chagigas, arba, soshen echeles, l'shnei yomim, v'layla echad. Because Chagiga is also considered Shalmei Chova, Chagigas Yudalit, and therefore it's impossible to interpret the Pasuk Lo Yolin with regard to Chagigas Yudalit that it's telling you that you have to eat it for a day and a night, meaning the day of the 14th, the night going into the 15th, and then it becomes possible. We know already from the extra word im in the parsha of Shalmei Nedava, we derive from that extra word that Chagigas Yudalit, insofar as it is a Shalmei Chova, it also gets 2 days and 1 night. So then the Brisa says it's impossible to say that boker means boker. It's 1 second, just 1 second. Let me just get to Cheshbon. That it's impossible to say that boker means boker rishon. Boker rishon, which means tesva. So again, that was up on the whiteboard. You remember the imaginary whiteboard that the word boker in this pasuk regarding Chagigas Yudalid is referring to Tezayin. Tezayin. You can't forget. Now, before we get to understand the kasha of Rav Yosef as Rava is interpreting it based on this brisa, we have to understand the brisa itself. There's something in the brisa here that makes no sense. The words "O Eno Ella Boker Rishon," as if to say that there was a serious havamina which we have to prove and reject, that the word boker is referring to esvav, boker rishon. Omar Mar, it says in the brisa, "O Eno Ella Boker Rishon." Wait a second. How could the brisa raise such a possibility? Amrit, you've already proven at the beginning of your brisa with the logic and the analysis. Kshu Omer b'Yomar Rishon, Hare Boker Sheni. And there's a girsa problem here. It should say b'Yomar Rishon La Boker, right? You should add the word La Boker. I have it in parentheses. In any event, we know from the word b'Yomar Rishon that La Boker is referring to Boker Sheni. So once the Bryce has already proven to me that boker means boker sheni, why is it regressing, surrendering that position and vacillating? Maybe the word boker means tesvav, means boker rishon. So the Gemara now explains the Bryce. This is what the Bryce has in mind. Oh, Eno. Maybe the pasuk doesn't have in mind except for this. Ella b'shtei chagigos hakos b'dav. We're going to actually split this pasuk between the Reisha and the Seifa. The Reisha is referring to Chagigas Yudalit, and the Seifa, the pasuk, the same pasuk, is referring to Chagigas Tesva. Achas Chagigas Arbasar, v'achas Chagigas Chamishasar. And therefore, each one has a different boker. Zu lebokra, v'zu lebokra, mathematic hey. You know, the first part of the pasuk, Lo Yolin Min Abasar, Asher Tizbach Ba'erev. That is referring to the Chagigas Yudalid, and that could be eaten only on Yom Yudalid and the night afterwards, according to this Havami. And the Isolina is chal already once you hit the morning of Tesva. And the second part of the pasuk, where it says Bayom Rishon La Boker, that's referring to Chagigas Tesva, and that's brought on its Yom Rishon, which is the first day of Chag Pesach Tesva. And the pasuk is teaching me that it can be eaten on that day and the night afterwards. And the Isolina is chal on the morning of Tezayin. This is all the Havamina of the Brisa, Hadar Omar. And now the Brisa, the time of the Brisa now rejects this Havamina. And we're going to conclude that this is, and prove that this is not the pshat in the pasuk. El the Kaimalon. Kaimala means we have a Kabbalah b'yodenu that Chagiga nechelis l'shnei yomim v'layla echad. We give it 2 days and a night. And now we go back to the pasuk of Nidvas Shlomim, and we have that extra word im. The im came. What are you going to do with the word im neder onidava? That's going to be the source from which we derive the conclusion as a reboot that Shalmei Chova, including Chagiga, can be eaten for 2 days and 1 night. B'mai, which carbon Chagiga are you talking about? Eva Chagigas Arbasar Haksivba Yom V'Laila. Because again, according to this Havamin in the Brisa, the first part of the pasuk is teaching me Lo Yolin, meaning beyond the night going into the 15th, and with daybreak of the 15th, it becomes lina, it becomes possible lina. The Ibe Chagigas Chamishasar, Haksiv, even in that case, it says Kasiv Ba Yom V'Laila. It's only a day and a night, because we take the second part of the pasuk of Lo Yolin, and we get from that pasuk up until Tesvav. Up until Tezayit, which means the day of Tesvav. So we get 1 day and the night before it. Ella. So since we have a Kabbalah biyadenu that Chagiga Necheles l'shnei yom v'layla echad, hi, this pasuk of Im Neder is coming to teach me le Chagigas Chamishasar that Chamishasar also will get 2 days and 1 night. Vehech kule kra, and the whole pasuk of Lo Yolid. Now, because we have Im to teach me that Chagigas Tesvav is 2 days and 1 night. So what do we do with this pasuk Lo Yolid? We no longer can split the pasuk into two, the ratio of the sefer. The entire pasuk is now referring to Chagigas Arbasa. And limit al Chagigas Arbasa, Shenechel Shtei Yom V'Layla Echad. Because of the original diuk at the beginning of the brisa, namely that since it says both Yom Rishon and it says Boker, that obviously Boker means the morning of Tezayin, the next Boker, which is Boker Sheni. Now, after all this, we can come back to understand why Rav Yosef, in Rav's transmission, rejected Rav Kahana. Because what do we see from this brisa? Taima, the reason why we thought that, the reason why we believe, I should say, and we interpret Boker as referring to Boker Sheni, is because it says Bayom Rishon Boker, which implies that the Karban Chagigas Yudalit should be eaten the entire Yom Rishon, which means Tesvav, and it only becomes Possibilina on the night going into Tezayin. And Memela, we learn from that the my Boker. What is Boker in the pasuk? It's Boker Hasheni, which means Tezayin. Hakol Heichad Boker Stama. From the fact that the brisa needs the double language for Yom Rishon, indicating Tesva, plus the second Boker to indicate that it only becomes possible on Tezayin. If we only had the word Boker itself, we didn't have Yom Rishon and then Boker, is then we would interpret it as Boker Rishon. We don't need the word Rachis. So even though we're talking about basa, the basa of the karba, which is relatively kal vis-a-vis a murim, nevertheless, we're going to darshan it as a limud, as a separate limud, to tell us that boker means boker rishon. And it's only because it says bayom harishon la boker, the double language, that we derive the conclusion that boker means boker sheni. How much more so your boker, Rav Kahana, with regard to a murim of the chagiga, we should certainly interpret that word boker means boker rishon, even without the smichus of the word rashis. And now we begin the Mishnah here towards the bottom of Ayin Aleph Amid Beis. Now the Mishnah deals with the case of shchita on Shabbos, shalokil chasam, meaning whenever the Torah says that the carbon is docha Shabbos, you have to make sure that you did a proper carbon. If you didn't do a proper carbon, then the shchita itself is not a kiyum carbon, it's not kosher, and therefore it's a violation of Shabbos. HaPesach sheshchato shalo l'shmo b'Shabbos, so your dalid fell on Shabbos, and you had a carbon Pesach, and had you shechted it l'shmo, you'd be allowed to be override the Shabbos, but he shechted shalo l'shmo, and as a result of shechting it shalo l'shmo, maybe he thought that if you're allowed to shech this carbon l'shma, then you're also allowed to shech the shalo l'shma. In any event, he made a big mistake because a Pesach sheshachta shalo l'shma is possible, and now he did such a thing on Shabbos, and he has violated the Shabbos, and therefore chayav holav chatos. Now the chiddush here is that he made an honest to goodness mistake, and had he done everything properly, this would have been Docha Shabbos. So really, he's making a mistake in something that, if not for his mistake, had he done it properly, it would have been Docha Shabbos. Nevertheless, he's chayav a carbon chatas because the carbon is possible. He wasn't mekayim the mitzvah of the carbon, and he was mechal Shabbos shelo litzor. Shar kol azvachim sheshchatan l'shem Pesach. Now, what's the deal if you had another carbon, let's say a shlomim, and you shechted it on Yudal B'Nisan, on Shabbos, for a Pesach? Im Einom Re'uyim. So now, what were these Shar Zvachim? Were they an Egel or an Ayil, which are species of animals that are completely excluded from a Korban Pesach? Or, for example, let's say it was a Ben Shnatayim. In all these cases, he forgot that today is Shabbos, or he mistakenly thought you're allowed to shech zvachim l'shem korban pesach on Shabbos. I don't know how he came to that conclusion. He's chayav chatos. Why? Because he cannot be makriv on Shabbos a korban that doesn't have his man kavua, and he's now shechting another korban, which is not royal pesach. Okay. Now we're going to get to a major machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. The Imra Uyim Hain, let's say he shechts a seh that's ben shana, and that seh was consecrated as a korban shlamim, and he shechted it l'shem Pesach. Right? He was so preoccupied with shechting psachim that he shechted a korban shlamim l'shem Pesach. Now, keep in mind, in such a case, it could be that the korban is kosher, and it's not ol l'bayil m'shem chova. But in any event, he was certainly involved in a mitzvah. Says Rabbi Eliezer, "Yechayv chatos." There's no compassion over here, even though he was involved in a mitzvah, and his mistake was because he was so torrid and preoccupied with the mitzvah of korban pesach, and he took another korban, let's say shlamim, shechting korban pesach. There's no leniency here. Rabbi Yeshua Poter. Rabbi Yeshua is of the opinion, this is what we're going to talk about, hatoeh b'dvar mitzvah. If a person makes a mistake in a dvar mitzvah, as long as his mitzvah was somewhat meaningful, he's poter. Now, this person had in mind to be mekayim the mitzvah of korban pesach. He was so torrid and bold to shech this pesach that he looked at this animal, which is a seh, and it's a ben shana, and he thought it was a korban pesach. In truth, it was a korban shlamim. Now, if you shecht a korban shlamim l'shem pesach, then at least according to Rabbi Yeshua, you're makayim the mitzvah of hakrovat shlamim. Again, you might have to replace it with another korban, but that korban is kosher. So you were toeh b'dvar mitzvah. You did a mitzvah. You did the wrong mitzvah by mistake, but you were involved in a mitzvah. And now the Gemara, the Mishnah goes on and gives us the dialogue back and forth between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. Amalo Rabbi Eliezer turns to Rabbi Yeshua, and he says the following: let's derive the chiyuv chatos from a kal v'chomer. Ma ima pesach shehu mutar lishmo. Do you have a case where your dalit falls out on Shabbos, and if it was shechted lishmo, the korban pesach is mutar because it overrides the Shabbos? Is kishashina eshmo, and if instead you shechted for a korban shlamim, you're not going to deny Rabbi Yeshua that he's chayav. I mean, that's what it says at the beginning of the Mishnah. Rabbi Yeshua didn't argue at the beginning of the mitzvah of the Mishnah that shokei pesach shalol l'shmo on Shabbos is chayav achatos. Is vachim acherim, let's say he has a korban shlamim, which could never override the Shabbos. At least in the first case, you had a Pesach, which could override the Shabbos, but he had in mind l'shem shlamim. But in case where he had a korban shlamim, that could never ever override the Shabbos. Same asurim, you can't shecht on Shabbos, even l'shman. Is now kshashina shman, and he shechted shalol l'shman on Shabbos. Enu din shechayev, certainly should be chayev. Amalo Rabbi Yeshua lo. You can't prove anything from a korban pesach. If a marta b'pesach, you're chayev in a korban pesach. Why? Sheshinhu b'davar asur. He shechted it for the sake of another korban, which you're not allowed to shecht on Shabbos. That's not called tav b'dvar mitzvah. Therefore he should be chayiv a korban chatos. But Tomar, but in the case of shar zvachim, sheshina b'davar ham davar mutar. He shechted it for the sake of a korban pesach. He mistakenly thought it was a korban pesach, which you're allowed to shecht on Shabbos. Not so in the Reisha. In the Reisha, he had in mind to shecht it for something that could never be shechted on Shabbos, another korban. But here in the Sefer, he had in mind l'shem Pesach. So at least grant him, give him that that rope, that he had in mind l'shem mitzvah. So he's Torah b'dvar mitzvah, and Torah b'dvar mitzvah is part from a korban chatos. Amalo Rabbi Eliezer, a murei tzibur yochichu. I'm going to prove to you from Tmidim and Mutsafim on Shabbos, shehein mutarim, you're allowed to shechta, lishman, right? Imuri, Tmidim Mutsafim override the Shabbos, right? That's derived from the pasuk b'moad. And nevertheless, if he shechts it lishman, for the sake of, if he has another carbon and he shechts it l'shem tamid or l'shem musaf of Shabbos, chayah. Even though, again, in his mind, he was shechting l'shem tamid or l'shem musaf, which you're allowed to do on Shabbos, because Tmidim Musafim override the Shabbos, we derive it from the Moed. So therefore, if a person shechts sharas vach l'shem Pesach, he also should be chayiv. Rabbi Yeshua Lova might be murei tzibur sheyesh lem kitzvah. I'll tell you why he's chayiv a chatas in the case where he shechted a carbon l'shem Tmidim Musafim, because there are X number of karbanos which fit those categories of Tmidim Musafim that override the Shabbos, will makriv them on Shabbos. And, there are a few people who are involved in the shechita of these very limited number of Tmidim Musafim. Now, once they finish that process of shechita of Tmidim Musafim, he should know that we're not going to bring any other karbanos Tmidim Musafim. We finished the whole process of Tmidim Musafim. Now he forgets and he shechts another carbon, l'shem tamid or l'shem musaf. That's not Torah b'dvar mitzvah. There's no justification for that kind of a mistake. He's got to bring a carbon chatas. But Tomar, but in my case, says Rabbi Yeshua, Pesach she'ein lo kitzvah, there's an endless number of karbanos psachim that are being shechted and brought on Yudalid. Everybody needs to bring that carbon. It's not like Tamid and Musafim or Shabbos. And if he sees many people that are involved in it, and he gets tired, and he's osek b'mitzvah, and therefore he thought a different carbon. It looked exactly like the carbon Tamid, like the carbon Pesach. It's a little seh that's a year old, and he shechts it l'shem Pesach. That's called the Torah b'dvar mitzvah. Reb Meir goes even a step further. He says, "Af hashochet l'shem murei tzibur poter." On every Shabbos, if a person shechts a carbon for the sake of Tmidim Musafim, even though, as you pointed out, Rabbi Yeshua yesh lem kitzvah, nevertheless, it's still considered a Torah b'dvar mitzvah, because, as Rabbi Meir, he had in mind for that carbon that's a mitzvah to be makriv on Shabbos. Now the Mishnah goes on to give us other cases of a Pesach that was shechted on Shabbos shelo kilchasa, and about these there's no machlokas. Shchato shelo liochlav, he shechted it for the carbon Pesach for the sake of a zaken or a chola, and we said in the previous Mishnah that that's possible. V'shelo l'nuyav, or he had in mind that this carbon should be shechted on behalf of a different chabura, not its chabura, or l'shem arelim, l'shem tmeim. In all these cases, he did this on Shabbos b'shogeg. He forgot that his Shabbos, or he thought that this Pesach is kosher. His chayiv, he has to bring a korban chatas. And since he shechted it for others that are not royal achila, the korban Pesach is possible. That was the mission we had on Samach Aleph. And you cannot be docha Shabbos for the shechita of this korban, which is possible. However, liochlav shlo lachlav, l'nuyav shlo l'nuyav, l'mulav l'orelim, l'tvei l'torim potter, because in all those cases the korban Pesach is kosher. Never, after he shechts the korban Pesach, he finds out that this set is possible the korban, like Krovas HaPesach, is chayiv chatas. Very interesting why he should be chayiv chatas in this case. L'chor is onus. I mean, the answer is he should have checked out the korban to make sure that there's no move. Shchato v'nimtza treifa b'seiser potter. However, let's say there was no way he could check it out because the damage was done to an internal organ, and therefore it's a treifa, and the carbon is possible. There's no way possibly he could have known that. Today, maybe they would do it with X-rays or so, but here's a case of onus. Shchato v'noda shemoshchu bailim es yodom. All right, so here's a case where the shochet did not know that the Bailim decided to drop out of this Pesach. They decided to join a different Chabura. It's a more prestigious Chabura. Oh, Shemesu, we had no way of knowing that the Bailim had died before the Shechita. Oh, Shenitmu, or that the carbon became Tomid. In all these cases where the carbon is possible and it doesn't override the Shabbos, nevertheless he's potter from a chatos. V'deisha shachat b'rshus. In other words, he had no way of knowing that this was a carbon possible. He assumed that it was a carbon kosher. So I'll say, here's where we're going to stop for today. And again, I thank you for being with me, and very, very intense learning. So tomorrow, Mr. Shem, the top of Ayin Beis, Rashi Tevis Ayin Beis.